greetings from Latter-day Media, presenting our dear friend and epic historian on Joseph Smith and church history, Brother K. Godfrey. This is podcast 22, Passport to Heaven, Part 5, 1844.
It's good to be with you again. This last couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to take a group of individuals and tour sacred church history sites. For this particular podcast, our last podcast relative to the life of Joseph Smith, it was most inspiring to me to spend some time pondering at Carthage jail, as we're going to be talking quite a bit about Carthage jail and the concluding hours of Joseph's life. It was good because I was able to determine what I feel would be the best way of approaching this subject and making it as inspirational as possible for you, and hope as I present this, your testimony will grow. This particular podcast will be dealing again with the Passport to Heaven. It'll be part 5, and we'll be discussing June of 1844. So let us begin. On the afternoon of June 25th, 1844, Joseph conducted numerous interviews with the militia and curious individuals who wanted to see this man and talk to him. On one occasion, he asked, "Do I look like a desperate character?" And they responded, "No, but we do not know what's in your heart." Well, Joseph said, "No, but I know what's in your heart. You have a thirst for blood, and nothing but blood will satisfy you. I prophesy in the name of the Lord that you will be satisfied with blood and will see the cannon's mouth. You shall seek for peace, but not be able to find it." Now, this prophecy was in relation to the Civil War, where many Missourian militia would be slaughtered in the bloody battles fought in the area. This particular slide reads, Missouri was a very dangerous place to live during the Civil War. Missouri was a battleground. Over 1,000 engagements were fought in the state, the third most during the Civil War. Joseph prophesied in D&C 121 that God's judgment would be poured out upon those who persecuted the saints. Quote, "Because their hearts are corrupted, and love to see others suffer, and swear falsely against my servants that they bring them unto bondage and death, woe unto them. In not many years their posterity shall be swept from under heaven. Their houses and barns shall perish. Behold, mine eyes see and know all their works, and I have in reserve a swift judgment in the season thereof for them all." The header for D&C 121 reads, "Prayer and Prophecies written by Joseph Smith the prophet, an epistle to the church while he was a prisoner in the jail at Liberty, Missouri, dated March 20th, 1839. The prophet and several companions had been months in prison. Their petition and appeals directed to the executive office and judiciary had failed to bring them relief. By 1863, the Union Army had recognized the mob violence in Missouri. As one eyewitness stated, "The devil came to Missouri, liked it, and stayed a while." One Missourian summed up the spirit of the state when he announced, "Mormons should not have civil rights no more than Negroes. Mormonism, emancipation, and abolition must be driven from the state." Well, the answer to this violence was swift and effective. On August 25, 1863, the Union issued General Order No. 11. It was enforced in the heart of the mobocracy of Jackson County, Missouri. The Union Army marched into Jackson County and forced the residents to leave their homes immediately. Well, does this sound vaguely familiar? By October of 1863, it is reported that, quote, "The depopulation of Jackson County is thorough and complete. One may ride hours without seeing a single inhabitant, and deserted homes and farms are everywhere to be seen. The whole is a grand picture of desolation." Well, as was in Far West, so was Jackson County. During 1861 and 1862, there were over 3,000 killed, 6,800 wounded, and 5,000 missing Missourian victims of the Civil War. Joseph's prophecy had been fulfilled. Well, it was a hot and sultry day in Carthage by late afternoon. Joseph and the others were arraigned on the riot charge before Judge Robert Smith, the Mormon hater. Judge Smith also had a conflict of interest as he served as a military commander of a company of Carthage Greys. At the arraignment, Chauncey Higbee was one of the prosecutors. The prisoners were bound over for trial, and a bail of $500 was set for each of the 15 defendants. The maximum fine for a charge of riot, which was a misdemeanor, was really only $70. This totaled $7,500, an unbelievable bail amount for the time. However, at the expense of mortgage farms, the bail was posted. Now, no reference was made or questions asked relative to an upcoming charge of treason that would be facing Joseph and Hyrum. Now, this slide reflects again bail for each of those individuals set at $500, 15 individuals being charged, total of $7,500. Now, today, if you were to move that to what the equivalent would be in dollars today, bail for each would be $17,946, and all 15 charges, $269,190 for a misdemeanor. Makes you wonder. At 6:30 p.m., Dan Jones overheard Joseph Jackson and others declare that they had 18 accusations against Joseph, and as one failed, another would be reenacted. Dan Jones was an influential Welsh missionary of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Jones is well known for having heard the final prophecy of Joseph Smith, namely that Jones himself would fulfill a mission to Wales before he died. Dan Jones was born August 4th, 1810 in Flintshire, the United Kingdom, and died January 3rd, 1862 at the age of 52 in Provo, Utah. At 7:30 p.m., most of the brethren had left for Nauvoo. Joseph and Hyrum went to a scheduled interview with the governor. They then took supper at the Hamilton Inn. At 8 p.m., Constable Bettesworth appeared and said that they were now to be jailed on a charge of treason. Now, this was an illegal, blatant effort to jail the prophet without a hearing. Joseph was charged with a capital offense. The charge of treason against the state of Illinois was because he put the city of Nauvoo under martial law, and for also calling out the Nauvoo Legion, and these were unbailable crimes. Accused of a capital offense without a preliminary hearing or trial were major injustices, and should have been dealt with promptly by Governor Ford, who was a past judge of the Illinois Supreme Court. Ford's failure to react basically pronounced the defendants guilty by the Supreme Court of Illinois, and the penalty for treason was death. The prisoners were then escorted to jail in front of a growing crowd of anti-Mormons. Captain Dunn and 20 of his men escorted the group, preventing any planned violent attacks. The group now consisted of 10. Joseph, Hyrum, Willard Richards, John Taylor, John P. Green, Stephen Markham, Dan Jones, John S. Fulmer, Dr. Southwick, and Lorenzo D. Wasson. With the charge of treason, Joseph had expected his attorney, James Wood, or H.T. Reed, to file a writ of habeas corpus. Attorney Wood was gone to Nauvoo on trial-related matters, but H.T. Reed was nowhere to be found. In fact, on the day of the martyrdom, one account has Reed not even in Carthage. Mr. Reed was apparently across the river in Fort Madison, Iowa. It seems that he had some business to attend to with some of Joseph's most bitter enemies, people like Robert Foster, Wilson and William Law, or Miss F. Boswick, the brutal anti-Mormon party leader from Fort Madison, Iowa, and the two sons of John C. Calhoun. This was the same John C. Calhoun who had locked horns with Joseph over states versus federal rights and authority. The same John C. Calhoun who was seeking the Democratic Party nomination for president. On November 4th, 1843, Joseph wrote a letter to candidate Calhoun, and in an attempt to assess his attitudes on the injustices inflicted upon the saints in Missouri, after hearing back, Joseph wrote a second letter, January 2nd, 1844, responding to the attitudes expressed by Calhoun. This is part of that letter. Let me read it to you. Your second paragraph leaves you naked before yourself, like a likeness in a mirror, when you say that, according to your view, the federal government is one of limited and specific powers, and has no jurisdiction in the case of the Mormons. So then a state can at any time expel any portion of her citizens with impunity, and in the language of Mr. Martin Van Buren, frosted over with your gracious views of the case, though the cause is ever so just, government can do nothing for them, because it has no power. Go on then, Missouri, after another set of inhabitants who have entered some $200,000 or $300,000 worth of land, as the Latter-day Saints did, and made large improvements thereon. Go on then, I say, banish the occupants or owners or kill them, as the mobbers did many of the Latter-day Saints, and take their land and property as a spoil. And let the legislature, as in the case of the Mormons, appropriate a couple of $100,000 to pay the mob for doing the job. For the renowned senator from South Carolina, Mr. John C. Calhoun, says the powers of the federal government are so specific and limited that it has no jurisdiction of the case. Obviously, Joseph and John C. Calhoun did not see eye to eye. The only weapons that the brethren had in Carthage jail was a very large hickory cane called the rascal beater, and this is Stephen Markham's cane, and then Dan Jones had a smaller cane. The slide reads, Stephen Markham. Shortly before Joseph went to Carthage, Stephen told him, I will do as you want me. Whatever it may be, I will go with you, or stop here and defend the city until I die, or go and give myself up. Just whatever you say, I will do. Well, considering Stephen's absolute commitment to the prophet, it is no surprise that Joseph referred to him in his personal journals as my beloved brother Markham. They were received by the jailer, Mr. George W. Stigall. Initially they were put into the criminal cell, but moved shortly after to a more comfortable quarters in the jailer's apartment. On Wednesday, June 26th, Joseph sent one of the brethren to Governor Ford requesting an interview. The morning was spent in discussion with Joseph's attorneys and drafting a witness list. Governor Ford arrived and conducted a lengthy interview with the brethren. Joseph explained the recent happenings in Nauvoo and continued to express his feelings that they were not safe in Carthage. The governor continued to promise their safety and pledged his authority in their behalf. He also said he was going to march the militia to Nauvoo to show them that all was under control, and promised the prisoners that they should come. Well, the afternoon was spent with a penknife trying to fix the warped door to the cell so it could close and latch in case of attack. Joseph commented, and I quote, I have a good deal of anxiety about my safety since I left Nauvoo, which I never have had before when I was under arrest. I cannot help those feelings, and they have depressed me. Joseph spent much time preaching to the guards. Many were relieved of their posts because they were convinced of Joseph's innocence. Numerous reports circulated that Joseph's time was very, very short. However, General Ford continued to say, your fears are not warranted. Counselor Reed visited Joseph and told him that because Justice Robert Smith had committed them without examination, he had no further jurisdiction in the case unless he consented to go to Nauvoo, where proper witnesses could be called. Well, this was encouraging news to the prophet, but the good news was actually very short-lived. Constable David Bettesworth came to the jail with an order from Justice Smith to bring the prisoners to court for a hearing. Mr. Stigall, the jailer, refused, knowing the illegality of the court. Apparently, Justice Robert Smith did not know what to do. He consulted with the governor, and the Governor Ford said, quote, we have plenty of troops. There are the Carthage Greys under your command. Bring them out. At 3:40 p.m., the prisoners were forced from the jail by a large group of Carthage Greys. Joseph, seeing the desperate situation, boldly marched into the center of the group and locked arms with the worst mobocrats that he could see, and then walked to the courtroom, all the time expecting to be shot. The hearing began at 4 p.m. Since the prisoners had no witnesses present, they were subpoenaed, and a hearing was set for the following day. The conspiracy was working. The charge of treason was a non-bailable charge, and the prisoners were forced to remain in custody and return to jail. At 5:30 p.m., Joseph had a visit from his uncle, Patriarch John Smith from Macedonia. His trip to Carthage was threatened on every side. Joseph was glad to see his kinfolk and asked John to return and tell his good friend Almon Babbitt to come to Carthage and to assist as an attorney for the trial that was scheduled for tomorrow. Joseph continued to receive regular correspondence from Nauvoo about its status. At 8 p.m., Joseph learned the governor had decided to march to Nauvoo the next day with the troops except for one company of 50 to guard the prisoners. The group given the responsibility of guarding the prisoners was the Carthage Greys. The prisoners would not be allowed to accompany the governor as he had previously promised. The prisoners also learned that their trial had been postponed to Saturday the 29th. This was done without the consent of the prisoners or their counsel. At 9:15 p.m., John Taylor offered prayer. John, Willard Richards, John S. Fulmer, Stephen Markham, and Dan Jones stayed with Joseph and Hyrum. That evening, Hyrum read from the Book of Mormon about the deliverance of the servants of God. Joseph and Hyrum retired to the only bed and the others to the floor. Dr. Richards sat up late writing. Late that evening, a gun was fired close by, and it caused Joseph to be awakened. He laid himself on the floor between Dan Jones and John S. Fulmer. Brother Fulmer used Joseph's arm as a pillow. John tried to rally the spirit of Joseph, but he was not to be consoled. Dr. Richards retired to the bed Joseph had left. Joseph whispered to Dan Jones, "Are you afraid to die?" Dan said, "Has that time come, think you?" Engaged in such a cause, I do not think that death would have many terrors. Joseph replied, "You will yet see Wales and fulfill the mission appointed you before you die." I'm going to have you now listen to a YouTube video from Jeffrey R. Holland as he talks about the testimonies of Joseph and Hyrum with regards to the Book of Mormon, and that emphatic phrase, "they would not do that."
When Joseph Smith and his brother Hyrum started for Carthage to face what they knew would be an imminent martyrdom, Hyrum read these words of comfort to the heart of his brother. "Thou hast been faithful. Wherefore thou shalt be made strong, even unto the sitting down in the place with which I have prepared in the mansions of my Father." A few short verses in the Book of Mormon. Later, when actually incarcerated in the jail, Joseph the prophet turned to the guards who held him captive and bore a powerful testimony of the divine authenticity of the Book of Mormon. Shortly thereafter, pistol and ball would take the lives of these two testators. In this their greatest and last hour of need, I ask you, would these men blaspheme before God by continuing to fix their lives, their honor, and their own search for eternal salvation on a book, and by implication a church and a ministry they had fictitiously created out of whole cloth? Never mind that their wives are about to be widows and their children fatherless. Never mind that their little band of followers will yet be houseless, homeless, and friendless, and that their children will leave footprints of blood across frozen rivers and an untamed prairie floor. Never mind that legions will die and other legions live, declaring in the four quarters of this earth that they know the Book of Mormon and the church which it espouses it to be true. Disregard all of that and tell me whether in this hour of death these two men would enter the presence of their eternal judge, quoting from and finding solace in a book which, if not the very word of God, would brand them as impostors and charlatans until the end of time. They would not do that. They were willing to die. rather than deny the divine origin and the eternal truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. For 179 years, this book has been examined and attacked, denied and deconstructed, and still it stands. Failed theories about its origins have been born, parroted, and died. From Ethan Smith to Solomon Spaulding to deranged paranoid to cunning genius. None of these frankly pathetic answers for this book has ever withstood examination, because there is no other answer than the one Joseph gave as its young, unlearned translator. I want it absolutely clear when I stand before the judgment bar of God that I declared to the world, in the most straightforward language I could summon, that the Book of Mormon is true. That it came forth the way Joseph said it came forth, and was given to bring happiness and hope to the faithful in the travail of the last days.
After listening to Elder Holland's remarks, how can you not be moved, especially with his comment, they would not do that? On Tuesday, June 27, 1844, the prophet was awakened at 5 a.m. by John P. Green and W. W. Phelps, who were on their way to Nauvoo. They were given messages to take to the prisoner's family. The day was overcast and a light rain fell. Dan Jones asked the guards, what was the disturbance all about last night? Well, the guard was Frank Worrell, a bitter Mormon hater. His reply was, and I quote, "We had too much trouble bringing old Joe here. Unless you want to die with him, you had better leave before sundown." Well, Dan Jones went to the governor with this news, and the governor said, "You are unnecessarily alarmed. The people are not that cruel." Dan Jones was not allowed to return to the prison. I want to read you of an incident involving this Frank Worrell and Porter Rockwell. Jacob Backentos was the Hancock County Sheriff from 1845 to 1846. He was not a Mormon, but was friendly to Joseph Smith and the people of Nauvoo. As such, he was referred to as a Jack Mormon. Now, because of his feelings towards the saints, he was being pursued by Frank Worrell on horseback. Worrell was a member of the Carthage Greys and commander of the guard at the Carthage jail, supposedly protecting Joseph Smith. Worrell and 3 others pursued Backentos towards Nauvoo. Backentos saw Rockwell, who was standing guard, and asked for help. At Backentos's command, Rockwell singled out Worrell, took careful aim, and shot him squarely in the belt buckle, knocking him off his saddle. His companions took their wounded leader to Warsaw, where he died. Backentos was indicted and tried for the murder by a non-Mormon jury. However, the non-Mormon testimonies given at the trial indicated that Worrell knew he was following Backentos and that he planned to kill him. Rockwell was likewise indicted and acquitted for the murder, since he was acting under Backentos's order. Well, thus ended the legacy of one Frank Worrell. At 8:20 a.m., Joseph dictated his last letter to Emma. In it he said, quote, "I am very much resigned to my lot, knowing I am justified and have done the best that could be done. May God bless you all." On that same day, June 27th, Dr. Southwick told Stephen Markham of a meeting held in Carthage the night before. At the meeting, it was said, quote, "If he did not get the presidential chair this election, he would be sure to have it next time. And if Illinois and Missouri would join together to kill him, they would not be brought to justice for it." Now, some sources indicate that Governor Ford and Judge Robert F. Smith were in attendance at that meeting. As the governor was preparing to go to Nauvoo, Cyrus Wheelock voiced his concern over the safety of the prisoners. Permission was granted Cyrus to visit the prophet. Being a rainy morning, Cyrus wore his overcoat, under which he smuggled into the jail a pepper-box six-shooter pistol for the brethren. Brother Wheelock was given numerous messages to relay back to Nauvoo. John S. Fulmer left the jail with Cyrus Wheelock in an attempt to round up the necessary witnesses for Saturday's trial. This now provided two weapons for the brethren, the first being a single-barrel pistol given Joseph by John S. Fulmer, the second the revolver from Brother Wheelock. Prior to leaving Carthage, Governor Ford sent a message to the jailer saying, quote, "I would advise you to keep the Smiths in the room in which I found them this morning, unless a closer confinement should be clearly necessary to prevent escape." Now, it's very evident that the governor did not want Joseph to escape, nor was he taking the brethren with him to Nauvoo. Here is a replicated pepper-box six-shooter, and this is what was smuggled in by Cyrus Wheelock under his overcoat that rainy morning. This gun had a tendency to misfire a number of times, and as you'll see here shortly, of the 6 barrels, only 3 fired at the time Joseph put it around the corner and unloaded it. By 10 a.m., the governor was headed to Nauvoo. He took Captain Dunn and his company with him, leaving the jail in the capable hands of 50 of the Carthage Greys, and dismissed the rest of the militia to return to their homes. At 12:20 p.m., Joseph requested Dan Jones, who was not allowed to come back into the jail, to take a letter to Lawyer Browning of Quincy and ask him to assist in Saturday's trial. Well, the mob thought that Joseph had asked Dan Jones to go to Nauvoo and raise the legion. Brother Jones was barely able to ride out of Carthage, his life being threatened on every front. At 1:30 p.m., Willard Richards became ill. Brother Stephen Markham was sent out for medication. Upon returning, he was not allowed to re-enter the jail and was forced out of town by bayonet. The occupants of the jail were now 4: Joseph, Hyrum, John Taylor, and Willard Richards. The stage had been set. The evil plan called for a group of 20 Warsaw militias to peel off and head for Carthage, as the group was en route to link up with Governor Ford at Golden's Point prior to marching on Nauvoo. Now, the plan was temporarily thwarted with the news that Governor Ford had ordered the militia troops disbanded and he was not going to have Nauvoo attacked. Thomas Sharp, editor of the Warsaw Signal, then mounted his big bay horse, and by the time he was finished with his inflammatory speech, he had a force of 84 murderers assembled. If they couldn't march on Nauvoo, they were going to march on Carthage. At 3:15 p.m., Joseph had Elder Taylor sing "The Poor Wayfaring Man of Grief." He sang the song twice. This particular verse is really quite striking. "In prison I saw him next condemned, to meet a traitor's doom at morn. The tide of lying tongues I stemmed, and honored him mid shame and scorn. My friendship utmost zeal to try, he asked me if I for him would die. The flesh was weak, my blood ran chill, but my free spirit cried, I will." At 4 p.m. the guard changed. Only 8 men were left on duty. The balance of the Carthage Greys were encamped a quarter of a mile away on the public square. At 5 p.m., Jailer Stegall suggested to the prisoners that they might be safer in the cell on the lower floor. Joseph turned to Brother Richards and asked, "If we go to the cell, will you go with us?" The doctor answered, "Brother Joseph, you did not ask me to cross the river with you. You did not ask me to come to jail with you. And do you think I would forsake you now? But I will tell you what I will do. If you are to be hung for treason, I will be hung in your stead, and you shall go free." Joseph's only reply, "You cannot." About this time, William R. Hamilton, a young boy who had been stationed as a lookout on the courthouse roof by Judge Robert Smith, hurried down from his perch to inform the captain that a large group of men were coming from the west. Captain Smith told him, "Tell no one, but let me know should these men head directly towards the jail." The mob then moved forward into striking distance of the jail. They crept up the hollow near the timber's edge just south of the jail. Here they blackened their faces with wet gunpowder, giving them the appearance of demons. They readied themselves and primed their weapon. Now, the weapon of choice was the Harper's Ferry 1816 musket. Many were equipped with bayonets, making these guns over 6 feet in length. Later, Willard Richards commented on the many bayonets being thrust through the door. The bullet used was a .69 caliber molten lead ball. The effective range of such weapons was less than 100 yards. They knew this needed to be a point-blank assault. Now, I have here with me a Harper's Ferry 1816 flintlock replicated musket from Cipicoli, Italy. I had it made there, manufactured to be exactly like the 1816 flintlock musket. This particular gun is a functional weapon and uses a .69 caliber molten lead ball, a little over a half an inch in diameter. This gun was used by some forensic scientists from the University of Utah as they reenacted the Carthage jail assault and what took place, some of which I'm going to talk to you about in just a few minutes. But it is a functional weapon, and it does shoot a .69 caliber molten lead ball. Slowly, like a snake in the grass, this group advanced, single file, along a fence line 8 rods, or about 45 yards from the jail. There they waited for a single gun to fire. They knew that they would have less than 10 minutes to finish the job, or face being confronted and arrested by those Carthage Greys who were not part of the plot. Suddenly, a shot rang out through the air, initiating this 5 minutes of mayhem. Frank Worrell's staging guards did their part, appearing to fire at the intruders. They then simply moved off to the side and watched the events unfold. The brethren, startled by the shooting, must have known immediately their worst fears were about to unfold. The terror that filled their breasts that day was tempered only in the knowledge that they were about to make the ultimate sacrifice. The Lord was preparing to greet his faithful servants. At 5:15 p.m., as the brethren were preparing to go below to the lower cell, the mob attacked. 100 painted-faced men stormed the jail. The mob entered the jail from the south door, the narrow staircase allowing only 2 abreast. As they approached the top steps, those in front fired their muskets into the empty cell at the head of the stairs, unaware of which cell the prisoners were in at the time. Suddenly, Joseph unloaded his pepperbox 6-shooter from behind the jailer's room door. It misfired 3 times, but 3 bullets found their mark, hitting 2 mobsters in the arm and another in the face. The mob was furious to think that the prisoners had guns. This act did, however, buy the brethren a few minutes as the mob reloaded and passed fresh weapons up the human chain on the stairs. Now, the platform at the top of the stairs is 97 inches long and 42 inches wide. To shoot through the east door with a 6-foot-long gun, a person would have to hold the gun head high, barrel pointed downward, and absorb the recoil with hands only. Perhaps 2, maybe 3 individuals could stand on the platform at any one time, and the mob was running out of time. The Carthage Greys, not involved in the conspiracy, had heard the initial gunshots and were advancing towards the jail. However, the Greys were slow to respond, executing a slow, disciplined march from Carthage courthouse with guns properly at shoulder and flags flying in the air as if these were on dress parade, being led by their leader, Judge Robert Smith, who knew exactly what was going on. Confident that the prisoners had no other weapons, the attacking mob again crept cautiously to the top of the stairs. They now took aim at the door. The first shot went through the keyhole, the second through the right upper door panel. This shot killed Hyrum, who was braced against the inside of the door. With the door partially ajar, the men on the platform rushed the door, trying to jam their used guns through the crack. Joseph, John, and Willard sprang to the left of the door, trying to knock aside the guns, and as the men were trying to force their way in. Thick, heavy, choking white smoke filled the staircase as gun after gun was fired. Flashes of burning powder particles were thrown from the musket side pan in all directions, burning anyone within reach. And the noise, the deafening blast after blast that echoed through the small jail. The only reprieve was the time it took to pass new guns to the top of the steps. Hyrum, the first to fall, was hit while braced against the door. A ball passed through his left cheek, out his throat, grazing his chest. He was spun around and fell to the floor a dead man, probably unable to utter any final words. Another ball, fired from the door, entered the back left side and passed through his body with such force that it completely shattered the watch that he wore in his vest pocket. At the same instant, another ball from the door entered his left leg. Joseph cried, "Oh, dear brother Hyrum." The room was now a shower of balls from all directions. Elder Taylor, seeing that he could no longer parry the guns pushing through the door, jumped to the window, where a ball fired from the door struck him in the left thigh, hitting the bone. The impact threw him against the window sill, breaking his watch. He was then hit once in the left wrist and again in the left knee, as he rolled under the bed, where he was hit a fourth time. This particular ball struck him in the left hip with such force that it tore the flesh in a savage manner, throwing blood and flesh onto the wall. The broken watch marked the time of the attack, 5:16 and 26 seconds. Joseph, seeing no safety in the room, and knowing that for the sake of those still alive, he had to leave, he calmly turned and sprang to the window. 2 balls pierced him from the door, hitting him in the lower back, and another in the right hip. And 2 balls from outside, one entered his right breast and the other below the heart. He fell outward from the window, exclaiming, "O Lord my God." He fell near the well on his left side, a dead man. Willard Richards, who had picked up the cane and was still attempting to ward off the enemy, heard the mob cry, "He's leaped the window!" The mob on the stairs ran out. Willard Richards' escape was miraculous. He was a very large man, and in the midst of a shower of bullets he stood unscathed, with the exception of a ball which grazed the tip of his lower left ear, fulfilling the prophecy given Willard earlier by Joseph, when he said, "The balls would fly around him like hail, and he should see his friends fall on the right and on the left, but there should not be a hole in his garment." Well, as Willard was leaving the room to hide in the adjoining cell, he heard John Taylor from under the bed cry out, "Take me!" Willard took John to the adjoining cell and covered him with an old dirty mattress. Willard said, and I quote, "This is a hard case to lay you on the floor, but if your wounds are not fatal, I want you to live to tell the story." Willard expected to be shot at any moment and stood near the door, waiting the onslaught. Suddenly, a loud cry was heard, "The Mormons are coming!" Or more probably, "The militia is coming." This caused the whole band of murderers to flee to the nearby woods. In the meantime, the governor was making a speech to the citizens of Nauvoo. He threatened the saints unless they toed the line. He said, and I quote, "A little more misbehavior from the citizens, and the torch which is already lighted will be applied, and the city will be reduced to ashes, and extermination would inevitably follow." But the governor left about 6:30 p.m. One source said when his group passed the temple, they stopped and admired the baptismal font and the sculptured oxen in the basement. Alpheus Cutler was sent to watch them. One of the governor's aides commented, quote, "It was too bad Joe Smith did not get a chance to finish the temple because it was a very curious work." Another then commented, "But he is dead by this time, and he will never see this temple again." Brother Cutler then replied, quote, "They cannot kill him until his work is finished." Another then said, quote, "Finished or not, by God, he will not see this place again, for he is finished before this time." They then mounted their horses and left in haste, heading towards Warsaw and the Fleming Inn, where they would revel in the fact that they killed old Joe. When the governor's group was 3 miles out of Nauvoo, they met 2 messengers headed towards Nauvoo with the news of Joseph and Hyrum's death. The governor stalled them until the records and public documents from Carthage could be secured. It was near midnight when Willard Richards penned a letter to the citizens of Nauvoo, telling them that Joseph and Hyrum were dead and that John Taylor was severely injured. He also told the citizens not to retaliate. This letter was signed by Willard Richards and John Taylor. The bodies were removed by Samuel Smith, Artis Hamilton, and taken to the Hamilton Inn to await transfer to Nauvoo. The night of the martyrdom was dark, dismal, and gloomy. A thick night air hung over Nauvoo. Many people observed a strange, eerie spirit that seemed to spread over the city. Bathsheba Smith recorded, quote, "There was such a barking and howling of dogs and the bellowing of cattle all over the city that I had never heard before or since. I knelt down and tried to pray for the prophet, but was struck speechless and knew not the cause." Orson Hyde later said, "There was an unspeakable something, an ominous significance in the firmament. Oh, the repulsive chill." By 1 a.m., June 28th, the governor has spoken to the Carthage citizens and told them to leave now, as he expected the Mormons to come and burn the town down. He and his posse then fled the area, riding off in the direction of Quincy. At 8 a.m., the bodies of the slain prophet and his brother were loaded gently into 2 oak boxes and covered with green tree limbs to shield them from the hot sun. They arrived in Nauvoo at 3 p.m., being met by a great assembly of saints, which included the Nauvoo Legion. The bodies were taken to the Nauvoo mansion house to be cleaned, dressed, viewed, and prepared for burial. Later, J.W. Wood, one of Joseph's attorneys, claimed that he counted 35 bullet holes in the walls, ceiling, and floor of the room, in addition to the 12 others that found their marks. At least 47 musket balls were fired that day, the day the Warsaw militia assaulted Carthage. As this tribute podcast now draws to an end, with so many years of study and research, I want to conclude by offering 2 unique testimonies. The first, by Robert D. Foster, one of those who persecuted the prophet Joseph. He said, "I have not seen a moment of peace since the martyrdom. I know that Mormonism is true, and the thought of meeting Joseph and Hyrum at the bar of God is more awful to me than anything else." And the other, from Governor Thomas Ford, quote, "The Christian world, which has hitherto regarded Mormonism with silent contempt, unhappily may yet have cause to fear its rapid growth. At the death of Joseph Smith, the church population totaled 26,000 souls, a number equal perhaps to the number of Christians when the Christian church was of the same age. Sharon, Palmyra, Manchester, Kirtland, Far West, Adam-on-Diamond, Ramus, Nauvoo, and Carthage Jail may become holy and venerable names, places of classic interest, much like Jerusalem, the Garden of Gethsemane, the Mount of Olives, and Mount Calvary. And in the event the author of this history feels degraded by the reflection that the humble governor of an obscure state, who would otherwise be forgotten in a few years, stands a fair chance, like Pilate and Herod, by the official connection with the true religion, of being dragged down in posterity, hitched to misery with an immortal name." 3 years after Joseph's death, Governor Ford and his wife Frances moved to Peoria, Illinois. Almost immediately, he and his wife's health started to decline. Frances died October 12, 1850, of cancer, and less than a month later, on November 3, 1850, Thomas died of tuberculosis. Broken, penniless, destitute, leaving 5 orphan children, the state appropriated $500 for his headstone in Springdale Cemetery, Peoria, Illinois. Brigham Young once said, and I quote, "No man or woman in this dispensation will ever enter into the celestial kingdom of God without the consent of Joseph. Every man or woman must have the certificate of Joseph Smith, Jr. as a passport to their entrance into the mansions where God and Christ are." Many will exclaim, "Oh, that is very disagreeable." But it is. Many will exclaim, "Oh, that is very disagreeable." But it is true. We have now followed the footsteps of Joseph. Our odyssey is concluded. Have you grown to love Joseph Smith, that most uncommon man who goes by I'm going to start that over. Okay. We have now followed the footsteps of Joseph. Our odyssey is concluded. Have you grown to love Joseph Smith, that most uncommon man who goes by a most common name? Without a testimony of Joseph and what he did, taught, and believed, the heavens will be closed to you, and you will never be permitted to enter therein. Seek after and find your own passport to heaven. And when you do, you will know that to walk in the footsteps of Joseph is to walk in the sandals of the Savior. I wanted to mention to you what my plan is for the future. I have 3 additional firesides that I would like to do, or podcasts as we're calling them, still dealing with the life of the prophet Joseph Smith. The first that I want to do will be his burial. His burial is shrouded in mystery and very, very confusing. And so we'll pick up on our next podcast with bringing the bodies to the mansion house and then ultimately their burial. So we'll talk about that one. The second podcast that I want to share with you will be the podcast dealing with the trial of those individuals that are accused of killing Joseph and Hyrum. We want to go to trial, and we'll see how that shakes out. And then the last podcast that I feel is important to do relative to the life of Joseph Smith is a comparison of the life of Joseph Smith with that of Jesus Christ. We'll call it Jesus and Joseph, Mere Reflections. And so we've got 3 more podcasts that we're going to do relative to the prophet Joseph. After that, we've got some great ideas. We're going to interview some guests, some important people that have done some incredible research. Wayne May, for one. We're going to talk to him a little bit. He's our expert on the Adena and Hopewell Indians as we talk a little bit about the Heartland model of the Book of Mormon and what's going on there. And there are other people we'll interview. So we're going to continue to do these podcasts. I have podcasts also I would like to share with you relative to Israel. I've been to Israel 30 or more times, speak the language, and I've had some incredible experiences there involving archaeology, in particular in the city of David. I have one presentation that I would like to share with you that's entitled, Where is King Solomon's Temple? Is it on the Mount, or is it somewhere else? So we'll share some of these with you. We'll look forward to doing that in the future. Those of you that have questions also relative to the subjects that we've been talking about, you certainly can contact us, and I will do my best to answer your questions. You'll want to do that through comefollowme2021@gmail.com. That's the source of being able to ask those questions that you have. And I hope you have questions. You have questions, it means you're looking, and you want your testimonies to grow. And I certainly hope 22 podcasts have helped in that fashion. Thanks again for joining me today.
This Come Follow Me video series is a bonus resource to enhance your appreciation of the prophet Joseph Smith with little-known facts and research about American and church history. Thank you for listening today and for sharing this comefollowme2021.com website. We sure appreciate those who have been contributing on our Patreon page under Latter-day Media. We'll have a link in the show notes, and we would love to invite more to help support this work. To contact Kay, email him at footstepsofjoseph@gmail.com.